wow, I just stand at the podium and it's quiet. So a few months ago, we polled our community, and yes, as we learned earlier, we listened to our polls, and talent analytics scored very high on what you guys would like to learn about. So as we did our speaker submissions, the O-Power story blew us away. So Dawn, Scott, and Alan are here to talk to you a little bit about what they did here in the past year at O-Power, and it's amazing, and I'm so excited to hear it.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? Yeah? Yay! All right, so as Mo said, we're excited to talk to you about the story that we've had and how we've built a talent analytics function, hopefully some lessons learned for you to take away. So to kick it off, Dawn Mitchell. I lead O-Power. I lead talent acquisition at O-Power, and I've been there for about 2 years.
Just FYI, this is a monthly thing. You don't see it up there, but Lars and Pete can appreciate it.
I think you mispronounced the answer.
Oh, yeah.
I like that. And I'm Scott Walker. I'm the sole people analyst on our HR and recruiting team.
All right, so for those of you that haven't heard of O-Power, we are the leader in cloud-based software for the utility. So we combine big data and behavioral analytics that produces insights to end consumers. Have any of you received a home energy report from your utility in the mail? Excellent. So that will not have O-Power, but that's O-Power, right? So we're kind of behind the scenes. It's white labeled with your utility. And to date, we've saved 8 terawatt hours of energy and over 20 million pounds of CO2. And my "I'm not lazy, I'm energy efficient" O-Power slogan. Okay. So what we're going to cover today, we're going to talk through our journey. So inspiration for why we decided we really want to have a talent analytics strategy, some past and present. We're going to deep dive into team performance, forecasting, and budget. And then we're going to take a bit of a pivot and give you some insights we learned along the way, so how we're integrating talent acquisition and HR data. And then we're going to wrap it up. All right, so I'm going to pass it over to Scott. Here you go, Scott.
Thanks. Awesome. Hello, everybody. So a little bit about me. I joined O-Power about 3 years ago as a sourcer on the team. And at the time, I was not very technical. I didn't really know anything about Excel or recruiting metrics or anything. But there was a need for us to start doing monthly dashboards and pulling metrics. So my boss tasked me with that at the time, and I ended up really liking it. And then as we grew a little bit bigger, there was a need to have someone doing that in a full-time capacity. So I took it on. But at the I really didn't know anything about the field at all. So I did some research, and the first thing I stumbled on was some research by Deloitte. They surveyed 435 companies and found that there are 4 levels of maturity when it comes to where people are in their talent analytics functions. And the first one is called reporting monkey. This is basically where you are pulling ad hoc reports, you're pulling single metrics such as what is time to fill today. And the benefit of it is basically to be prepared for a meeting, or like being prepared for tomorrow's like all hands. And it's very simple, very basic stuff. But 56% of organizations are at this level. How many of you feel like you are at this level right now, where it's very basic, you're just general reports? Some of you? Cool, nice. All right, the second level is called advanced reporting. 30% of organizations have reached this level. This is where you're not just pulling a metric like time to fill, you're benchmarking it over time. You're seeing how it's progressing over the months. You have a goal in mind. You have an idea of what a good time to fill is versus a bad time to fill. And so this level kind of lets you keep track of how you're performing. You're putting things in context so that you can understand your data. But you're not really using it yet to like solve a specific problem. Like just pulling time to fill over time doesn't tell you how to reduce time to fill. How many of you feel like you're at this phase where you have goals, but you're not really necessarily using data to solve problems? Some of you? Cool. The third phase is proactive analytics. So proactive analytics is when you're actually solving a problem with data and statistical analysis. You are looking at the root cause of an issue and saying, like, time to fill is this because there is a problem with our hiring manager. You're drilling down into the data and you're able to identify the problem and figure out how to tackle it. Things like how to staff your recruiting team to meet different hiring needs, testing tools, saying the ROI of this tool was X many hires. However, this tool was not as effective, saying things like that, so you can actually make a decision. How many of you feel like you use data to make decisions? Some of you? Cool. A little bit less hands there. So 10% of organizations have reached this level. So don't be sad if it's not you yet. It's not us yet either. The fourth level is predictive analytics. So you're not just solving current problems, you're able to forecast future outcomes. You're able to say, I think the attrition rate next year, based on our surveys, based on recent trends, is going to be XYZ, and this is how much it's going to cost to replace everybody. So really incorporating a cost component and a predictive component to it. How many of you feel like you have mastered predictive analytics at your company? Anyone? Not a single person, really? Okay, cool. So what does a snapshot of our process look like? So when I joined in early 2013, our bandwidth looked a little bit like this. So I was spending most of my time scrubbing data, making it accurate, just so that it was able to be reported, and very little time on the more advanced reporting and analytics. But the good thing about recruiting is that you have a goal. You have to fill roles. You want to fill them on time. And so we did do a little bit of problem solving and a little bit of forecasting for the year, but it was pretty basic. Right now, it looks like this. So the thing to note here is that level 1 and level 2 never, ever, ever go away. You are always going to be spending time scrubbing data, making it accurate, doing some of the basic things. People will always have a need for basic reports. You're always going to get someone to say, hey, can you pull this for me tomorrow? And that's okay. It's just realistic. And for us, an aspirational way this would look is this. So it's a little bit more even over time. But again, level 1 and level 2 never go away. So why do we care? So organizations with mature talent analytics functions have a lot of benefits, like improvement in talent metrics overall, higher stock, increase in quality of hire ratings, all these different things, and we wanted to experience some of these benefits for ourselves. And we knew that we were just a small company. There's places like Google that have whole buildings for this kind of stuff, and we basically just had me. So there's that. And we were warned. So this is a kind of a fancy way of saying that you won't really see the value of your analytics until you've mastered the basics, the reporting. So there's a choke point typically when you are kind of starting to ramp up and starting to get a little bit more advanced with your data, and you're working really, really, really hard just to get a little bit of value out of it. And you really aren't able to see that value until you can use your data to solve problems and predict, which is right there. So what did it look like our first year? There's tons of recruiting metrics. And because I was inexperienced and everyone else on my team was not super experienced in this area, we basically just tried to pull everything under the sun. And what we did was we created dashboards for every recruiting pod, like sales, tech, and we would iterate on these dashboards every single week. So every week we would get a report of all the summary metrics basically for that week. And nothing was really benchmarked over time. There was very little goals, and so people were kind of using it to be prepared for their meetings with hiring managers, but that was it. There was really no other value to it, so it's not super great. And then also 90% of the time was spent scrubbing data, basically, and just making it accurate, because it was our first kind of peek under the hood. And a year later, what level do you think we would be at? Anybody? Level 1, level 2? Level 1, yes, we were stuck. Stuck like this puppy. Yep. We were stuck at level 1, and why were we stuck at level 1? First of all, it's a lot easier to get insight from recruiting data if you can link it with data in HR and in finance. It just becomes so much more relevant, and we had no way of kind of connecting our systems. We were all using different IDs, and it was just a hot mess. So there was a lack of alignment there. There was a lack of process among our recruiters. Every recruiter was using the system in different ways. If some of you have an ATS, I mean, most of you do. So you kind of know that you can use it in different ways. Maybe you log phone screens sometimes, only if the candidate is good or qualified. So if you don't have everyone using the system the same way, you really can't pull accurate metrics at all. So that was a huge barrier for us. And also, when you have no direction from the management team at your company about how to use data and what they want to see, you create dashboards that are basically irrelevant. And you're showing them things that they look at and they say, I don't care about this. So that was the issue that we were facing. And now I'm going to hand it off to Dawn again. And she's going to talk about how we pivoted from that.
Okay, so I've been with OPower for 2 years, and in September of last year, I took over all of talent acquisition. And as I was going through the interview process, I heard all of this, which I'm sure resonates with most of you. So you're not hiring fast enough, your team's too big, your team's too small, the quality's not good. Upon taking the role, really needed to focus on fixing some of these misperceptions that they had of our team. So Scott and I got together. We spent all of Q4 of last year in a room, kind of working through some of the key issues that we were facing. The other thing that was happening at that time is I was pregnant. So I was 6 months pregnant. He was so cute. His name is Jack. We were closing out our year, closing out Q4, and I was going to be out in Q1, which is a huge hiring season, right? You've got your plan, you're ready to go. And I wanted to leave the team in a spot that they felt confident in what they were doing, the business understood goals and expectations, and so really needed to create a framework that worked while I was out. We were also at that point about 6 months post-IPO. IPO, see you later. This is typical. People come for the big IPO, they move on to the next thing. And so I knew there was going to be a spike in attrition. I had seen this happen before, and I wanted to be sure the team was staffed appropriately for it. Along with that, the company was shifting directions. We're accountable to external stakeholders. And so we had fickle hiring managers, weren't sure what they wanted, profile was shifting, and it was very frustrating for the recruiters. How do we tackle that? And then how do I staff my team? So we had a generalist model in the past, so you just kind of took what you got, you handled it. We were most recently at that time in a SME model, right? So you were tech recruiters, sales recruiters, and you did not cross paths. So when tech recruiting was booming, they were overworked and sales was just kind of hanging out. So how do we do flex, right? If we're going to do flex, how do we do it? How do we make it work? Because there is some merit in having the SME model, right? You really get kind of deep with your talent pools there. But we needed to use our resources better. That leads me to capacity, right? So how many recs should a recruiter manage? I hate that question, and I'll show you why on the next slide, because not all 2 recs are the same. How do I explain to the business what a capacity is, what the right capacity is for a recruiter, and then how does that align to our forecast, and can I predict if we're going to hit the hires that they're asking us to make? So Scott and I just tri-stormed a new framework, and I love the word tri-storm. I heard it at a conference a few weeks back. We just don't have the luxury of sitting in a room over 6 months and thinking through something until it's perfect, so we just decided we were going to tri-storm it. So we affectionately call this the quadrant model, so I'll walk you through it. Within the quadrant model, we are categorizing recs on 4 levels of difficulty based on uniqueness of skill set and frequency of hire. So what you see in quadrant 1 is for us a receptionist. So typical time to fill is around 60 days. We give that about 2 capacity points. So that's low uniqueness of skill set. We don't hire them too often. As you move up to quadrant 2, for us that's a project manager. Around 70-day time to fill. We hire quite a few of them. Not too hard to find in the market. There's a handful of PMs in the area. As we move over to quadrant 3, that's around 80 days for us for time to fill. That's going to be a sales executive. We hire a lot of them, and they're very hard. We have a long sales cycle, tough profile for us to find that fits at OPower. And then as you move down to quadrant 4, these are more of our leadership roles, right? So we don't hire often, but they are tough. So around 120 days to fill and 6 capacity points. So this gets to my no 2 recs are the same, right? We can really tell a story around how many points should a recruiter carry, not how many recs. And we based our time to fill on averages within those quadrants. So Scott did a lot of scrubbing of past data to understand kind of where recs fell. We used a little bit of our best judgment to kind of group them and then matched it with time to fill data we had. Capacity points for us, recruiters sit around 25 to 30. When they get over 30, they become ineffective. And this, as Scott went through the model that we used as we were building a talent analytics strategy, this is a level 3 analytics, so using data to truly solve problems. Okay. All right, so I'm going to bounce it over to Alan, and he's going to talk about how we're using this kind of day-to-day to manage our recruiting team.
All right. So like I mentioned, I manage technical recruiting for OPower. So I'm involved a lot with looking at data on a day-to-day basis, week-to-week basis to try to evaluate recruiters. So I want to look at some of the things that we look at. So time to fill, it is the single worst measurement probably a recruiter will ever see, just in the number itself. Like Dawn mentioned, some roles are easier to fill, some are harder to fill. So if you're just slapping a number on one recruiter and saying, your time to fill is 80 days, it just doesn't have a lot of relevance. And as Pete has mentioned before in some of his blogs, it's a terrible metric. But we can use that number. We can drill down, we can investigate a little bit more, and actually solve some problems with our time to fill. So you'll see, it can be awful, it can be awesome. It's really what you do with it. So taking a look at historical benchmark with us, you will see in July of 2014, before Dawn came on, our time to fill was terrible overall, just an average, 158 days. As we mentioned, everybody had a little bit different process. We had hiring managers that had been at OPower a long time. They had done things differently. New recruiters that did things differently from older recruiters. Everything was kind of just a little bit of a hot mess. And the improvement that you see is magically when Dawn came on board. So she will definitely take credit for the drastic drop in time to fill. But as you'll see, once Dawn came on, we started putting in different metrics, and we started actually looking at data and trying to solve problems with the data. It started to level out a little bit more. So our historic time to fill was 93 days on average between 2012 and 2015. We were able to reduce it down to 76 days by tracking data and working on that a little bit more. So here are two different metrics that we'll look at. The model that Scott showed before, this is level 2. So this is something you're still going to spend a decent amount of time. It'll never go away. But this is a way we can use time to fill to actually drill down a little bit more. There's a lot of numbers up here, so I'll try to kind of walk you through it. But for tech recruiting, and really any recruiting, this is a normal process that we understand. We see the resume, we decide if we want to screen the person, we push them to the hiring manager, we do an on-site interview, and we try to make an offer. So in the time to fill, I'm looking across the board, and I'm looking at these different verticals. So let's take Rick, for example. I'm looking at this recruiter. The 38 days, has to pop out. That's the candidate is sitting with the hiring manager for 38 days. That's a huge red flag. Like, why is it sitting right there? Is the hiring manager too busy? Are they putting a hold on the rec and failed to tell recruiting about it? But it gives me the data that I need to go drill down. Is there just a really bad relationship between the hiring manager and the recruiter that I'm not aware of yet? But it's a huge red flag that we can go on, we can sit down and try to drill down a little bit more. The other big thing is looking at data time over time. So many times we're just looking at weekly data, and then it gets trashed, and we move on to the next week and look at that week's data. But looking at time over time, Rick's time to fill actually went up. So there's another level of concern. We're not getting better, we're actually getting a little bit worse. So it gives me the data that I need to either go to the hiring manager and the recruiter to drill down and investigate a little bit more. Here's another metrics that we use. Everyone talks about quality of candidates, and this is a whole nother topic that we could get into and do a full presentation on. But just in terms of quality of candidates, when I'm looking at Rick and I'm looking at this data as we drill down a little bit farther, he gets a ton of applicants for his rec, but he's screening a ton of people. Like, I will guarantee you 119 good qualified candidates did not come out of 192 applicants. So that tells me a couple things. Rick probably doesn't know the exact profile that he's looking for. He doesn't know what that person looks like on paper. He doesn't understand it. There's another lack of communication probably between the hiring manager and Rick. So either the hiring manager doesn't know what they're looking for, or it's just not being communicated properly. 16 are going under the hiring manager, 8 on sites, only 3 offers. When you compare those numbers to another recruiter like Maggie, you just see the quality that Rick's pushing through is way off. And so, like we mentioned, time to fill is just one number. It can be terrible. It's just not accurate. Recruiters really shouldn't be judged on just that one number until you start drilling down a little bit more. So it gives you the opportunity to make changes, investigate, and make your process a little bit better.
I should note this is a portion of a scorecard that we give to recruiters 3 times a year, right? So they can look at their performance time over time. Hiring managers have access to it.
So we hit Q2 of 2015. We saw a spike in attrition. So we wanted to figure out a way that we could increase the capacity of our recruiters without bringing on additional resources and not diminishing the quality. So in Q2, we saw this spike, and we did a crazy quarter bonus. So what it was basically is we wanted to offer recruiters 0.5% of a new hire salary in terms of a bonus. Because of our quadrant model, you have some recruiters that maybe they're only working on a couple of recs in quadrant 4, but generally quadrant 4, they're harder to fill. The salary is going to be higher. They're more senior folks. Versus maybe somebody's working on 10 recs that are in quadrant 1. The salaries even out where everyone kind of had that equal opportunity to make roughly the same thing. We carry 10 recruiters. It was on average about $3K per recruiter, so about $30,000 to spend. So this was one of the ideas of how do we tackle this spike in attrition versus maybe going outside or doing something else. So what do you think happened? So we do this, crazy quarter bonus. Everybody gets excited for it. Everybody wants to make a little bit more money. What do you think actually happened? Anyone? Do you think it works? Went down? Productivity went down? So we actually saw a 28% increase in capacity points. So our quadrant model, people went from 21 to 27, so they increased 6 capacity points. Offer accepts went from 5.2 to 7.1. So during that quarter, recruiters had 2 additional hires on average than they did in previous quarters. And our time to fill actually was reduced by 4 days. I think most people would probably think that the quality would go down because the increase in capacity, but our time to fill actually went down by 4 days. So this was something that we kind of tri-stormed, and we saw success with it. We're actually running it again right now for Q4.
And I talked about having a flexible model, right? Because they didn't want us to hire and fire and be overstaffed as a recruiting team. So this is a really nice flex approach, right? You can spike it up in one quarter, you can not do it the next, just depending on what your hiring plan looks like. Yeah, every recruiter was eligible.
Sorry, can you actually repeat your question so everyone can hear you? Sorry, was everyone's productivity, for instance, Rick, the sort of laggard recruiter, did he benefit?
Oh, gotcha.
Actually, yeah, because we've anonymized the names, by the way. There's no one really named Rick, just to protect confidentiality. So just to be candid, he did, however, not to the extent that the other recruiters did. But it was across the. No one on our team decreased in performance as a result of the bonus, for sure.
I'm going to turn it back over to Scott to talk more about how we use data to forecast and how we use budget numbers to influence our business side.
How to get money, basically. So how do we use our new framework to forecast and get money for our team when hiring needs spike? So expect the unexpected. So in every fall, we would get a hiring plan from finance that included all the roles that they thought hiring managers wanted for the year and an average historical attrition rate, basically. The problem with this is that it had no resemblance whatsoever to what would happen in the year. And so we would always get caught in the middle of the year, either just being totally understaffed or filling roles really, really late, because it was always actually more than they expected. So why was it so off? You really have to model in all the stuff that happens mid-year. Hiring managers don't know what they want 3 months from now or 6 months from now. They know what they want now. So you can look at historical trends of unexpected mid-year ads and model those in. You can also look at new deals and reorgs that might be happening due to management changes, things like that. You can model those in as well. And lastly, you really should never use just your average historical attrition rate. You need to look at the trends in attrition. And we had seen a recent spike in attrition, and instead of using the historical average, we modeled that spike up, and that's kind of exactly what happened. So here was the initial guidance that they proposed. Here was our forecast, and they looked at this, and they were like, no way, absolutely not. But we were really confident in our data, and we proposed a plan to them, and they bought it, and they were like, okay, we'll go with it for now. We'll give you, like, tell me how much money you need to get stuff done. So we had to make a business case for resources. So forecasting 250 hires for the year with our current team size, we would only be able to get to 80% of our goal with 7 recruiters, and 30% of our roles, so 1 in 3 roles, would be filled significantly late, and we wouldn't be able to support new business deals that were happening. So highlighting to the business the impact that not hiring has on them, not just saying, oh, this is bad for my recruiting team. And so we also proposed we didn't propose it, but we showed them an expensive fix. This is how much it could cost if you wanted an immediate fix. So relying totally on agencies, it would cost $700K to just supplement all of our bandwidth with agencies, and they'd have to be successful. There's no guarantee. And so why would this be kind of our immediate fix? It's because it takes quite a while for us to find the right recruiter for a company, and ramping them up takes about 3 to 4 months, our data shows. So we couldn't fix our problem immediately. However, we knew that we couldn't get this, and we proposed an additional cost-effective fix. So we kind of went in with the tactic of, here's how much you could spend, and now $350K doesn't sound that bad. So basically what we did is we subscribed to Hire.com. How many of you guys know of Hire.com? Yeah, it's getting pretty popular. So we have a subscription service to Hire.com, and it's basically a platform where you can find active tech talent. It's really hard for us to find on like LinkedIn and when we're sourcing for people who are actually interested in looking, especially when they're engineers. So Hire.com has active tech talent. We hired a contractor for Q2 and Q3 to handle our easier recs so that our experienced recruiters could focus on the harder ones. We implemented the recruiter bonus program that Alan talked about, and we also tried out a referral bonus program. We were giving $10K a referral hire for tech hires, which is like kind of a lot of money. So yeah. So what happened? That was our initial guidance. That's our holistic forecast, and that's what happened. So really, really, really close. So this stuff works. This stuff really worked for us, modeling out trends instead of just relying on averages and not factoring in the unexpected. So we're on track. We're currently on track to meet 100% of our goal by the end of year, which is awesome for us. We've hired 235 out of that 250. And what didn't work? The only thing that really didn't work was that 10K referral bonus. Did not produce any other hires that we would, the rate of referral hires did not go up at all. And then what worked, Hire.com absolutely worked. It yielded 2 hard-to-fill tech hires per month for us, which is huge. And then our new resources and incentives increased our capacity by about 20 roles per quarter. And so we were really, really happy to see this. And guess what's happening right now? Budgeting is happening again, and we're getting the same stuff. So it's having to reprove to the business basically what are stuff.
The nice thing is we have that, right? So when going into conversations this year, we got the forecast, and we're like, hey, let's look at last year, right? And they're like, oh, that's odd.
So it's a little bit of like a mic drop moment for us, I'd say. Yeah.
I'll note too, the referral bonus program that we did, we already offer a really good referral bonus program. And so our thought was, okay, well, we'll just give them a little bit more money. Like we'll incentivize them monetarily to give more referrals. That's the piece that didn't work. I mean, we rely heavily on referrals. We get a lot of really good referrals. So basically the monetary value from going to 5 to 10 or 7 to 10 or something like that, that was no extra incentive for anyone at all. So.
Not necessarily the quality of referrals when they come in the door. So trying to increase volume, the reputation might.
That's great, and I will tell you, coming out of what we saw didn't happen out of that referral bonus, we're going to relaunch our referral program next year, because this has been a big storming year for us, and that's great. That's one of the components we're looking at, so maybe we can talk afterwards.
But I should mention that we did see an increase in volume of referrals. We just didn't see an increase in the quality at all. And so we got just a lot of noise, no extra hires out of it.
Yeah, my neighbor's looking for a job. I'll throw him in the system.
See what sticks.
Yeah. Just pivoting a little bit back to kind of what I was talking about earlier about scrubbing data and making it accurate. You really need to do that to be able to do anything with your data, and you get a lot of value out of integrating your data with other systems. So HR is a big one for us. So we've done a couple cool projects with HR, and the first one that I did was looking at how our interview scores relate to performance reviews. So can we predict who will be a top performer based on how they performed in the interview? And at first, we saw that there really was no relationship at all. And so I just kind of looked at the data a little bit more, and I started noticing that the more interviewers that someone actually had on the panel, the more we could predict it. And it turns out that 5 is the magic number for us. When we get to 5 interviewers, we can significantly predict who will be a top performer or a bottom performer based on how they scored in the interview. And if we look at who is involuntarily terminated at OPower, so fired, 83% of our involuntary terminations were interviewed by less than 5 people. So that was really huge for us to be able to say, we need everyone to be part of the interview process. We need a full interview panel. We need backups if they can't come. And especially for our really critical hires, we need to have a full interview panel. So it's good for us to be able to illustrate that. We also looked at how source of hire relates to quality. And the first would be performance. So how does source of hire relate to being a top performer, being a mishire, so leaving within a year and being categorized as a non-regrettable termination, and kind of everyone else in the middle. And we found that there was no difference in terms of source of hire and performance ratings. So sometimes we were hearing things like, oh, recruiting isn't giving me as quality of candidates as I get from referrals and stuff. And so when it comes to performance reviews, that's not true. However, if you look at retention by source of hire, there's a pretty big difference. So we found that intern conversions and referrals were twice as likely to stay past 2 years than candidates that were given to us by agencies or sourced by our recruiting team. So we saw this and we were like, oh, do we show this? Oh, no, it's not so great.
That's exactly how that conversation went.
But actually, the business usually always really appreciates that kind of level of honesty, too. We can build credibility when we show them something like this, and then we also show how amazing we are, too. So it's also great insight for us to say, like, well, why would this happen? And so our hypothesis is that referrals and intern conversions get the most realistic job preview before joining the company. They have worked with someone on the team. They've actually spent some time at OPower, so they kind of know what it's like. And recruiters and agency recruiters, their job is to sell the company and cast it in a positive light. And so now we know, at least at the end of the process, we don't necessarily want to lead with our negatives, but at least before we hire someone, we need them to have like a good sense of the pros and cons of OPower and kind of how our culture is, and just making sure that they're a right fit before they join.
And coming out of this, we're building an employee value proposition to articulate that in a way that's still positive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you have a question, Anna?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
So when you looked at the referrals having longer tenure,
Absolutely. So yes, so absolutely we would consider the fact that they might have a buddy when they join as well. So that's another very important theory. So yeah, and so that would be really taking that analytic to the next level and saying, and actually being able to pinpoint someone having a buddy or not. We're a little strapped for our resources to be able to do that, but definitely like a Google would be able to do that, and that would be a really awesome project for us to do. And so as we build out this even further in the future, perhaps that's something that we would look at. Any other questions about this? Yeah. Oh.
Yeah,
Oh, okay. Yeah. I think I can hear you then.
for everyone else to hear.
Did you find that some interviewers or group of interviewers were a better source of good hires than others?
Actually, no. So if I did that. So I looked at the performance ratings of the interview panels and connected them with the performance of the hires, basically. And there really wasn't a relationship between interviewers who were top performers and the hires that were top performers at all. And the same thing with referrals. People who are top performers who refer hires, basically, there's no relationship between their performance and the other person's performance, at least for us in the data. So any other questions on this?
Oh,
Just one more. How about you in the back? Yeah.
you can wait for the mic real quick.
No.
How did you get past the problem of scrubbing your data for accuracy?
So, because it never goes away, what we do right now is we do weekly rec reviews or monthly rec reviews, depending on how the data is going, where we actually sit down with the recruiters and have them validate their data. And I also do
In a team setting.
In a team setting. So it kind of puts them on the spot.
Yeah.
I look like
They love it.
a big jerk sometimes, but it's okay. But really, it can't just be my job because I wouldn't have the time to look at every single thing. So I think a big part is our recruiters have been amazing about adopting the process and truly living in the system. So.
For the sake of time, we're going to be here, I think, through lunch, and we'll be here for the day. I'd love to run through the deck just so you've got kind of a full picture and maybe answer some questions after. That's all right?
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I'll move on. So, and then future for us with integrating HR and recruiting data is really getting a tool that can actually integrate them so that we don't have to do it all in Excel. So Tableau is an example of something that you can actually use to drill down into your data, and executives can log in and actually play with the numbers. So, and then I wanted to mention yeah, sure. Oh yeah, sure. Tableau.
So we use Workday for our HRIS, and we use Greenhouse for ATS, and we're not going to use Workday anytime soon for their ATS, and so we need that wrapper. That's what we're looking at.
So, comparing ourselves to our talent competitors. So this is a free thing. You guys probably, some of you have seen this before, but one free thing that we do is we log into Glassdoor and compare ourselves to talent competitors. And so I've anonymized the companies because some of you might be in the room, but this is how we compare to the Glassdoor average and also our talent competitors. And what we've gotten out of this, and what's helpful for HR, is seeing that we are better than the Glassdoor average at things like comp and benefits and culture and in general, just the dimensions of happiness at a company. However, we kind of sit in the middle of the pack when it comes to other small tech companies that kind of have a cool culture. And so it's really helpful for us to know what our strengths and weaknesses are. How many of you have done this in Glassdoor? Anyone? A couple of you? Yeah, cool. So wrap up. I'm going to hand
Wrap
off to
up.
Dawn.
Would you like?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
my throat is so dry.
All right, so for a wrap up, some do's and don'ts. So do live in the system and consolidate. I was going to mention the weekly reviews here. It's painful. They don't like it. It can sometimes be embarrassing, but it is a really effective way to get everybody on the same page, for them to understand trends and behaviors to why things aren't making it into the system. Always be goaling. So set goals, track them over time. If you're not tracking them over time and holding recruiters accountable, there's really no point in having a goal. Analyst is an insider. So when I took over the team in September, and I mean, Scott just had such a passion for it, I was like, we can really leverage him. I made it a point to include him in my management team meetings. If he doesn't know the inner workings of why I want to use budget this way, or what we may do with a recruiter and kind of what I'm thinking, he can't be as effective, right? So if he really understands what my end goal is, he can come to me with a variety of different options. And I would say you feel the same way?
Awesome. I feel very, very important.
Good.
Thank you. Very
As you
valued.
should.
Thanks.
Construct narratives and ask why. I'll let you talk to this because I know you implemented this recently.
Yeah, sure. So you don't just want to show a graph with no explanation or context. You want to include a takeaway from that graph, and you want to highlight on that graph what you want someone to pay attention to. So actually, even a little text box that just points to something that you want people to pay attention to can really help. You also get limited insight from recruiting data if you're just looking at the aggregate. So just what is our source of hire in general? You really need to segment. You need to say, here's our source of tech hires, here's our source of sales hires, and drill down further and also look at how it changes over time. And that really just helps you clarify what you're getting out of your metrics, and you just a lot more value from it. Yeah.
And beg, borrow, and steal. So we have a team of one. I mean, you've leveraged relationships with finance, with our own analytics team.
Yeah, so like I mentioned before, when I joined, I had really no technical skills at all. I didn't even know how to sort a column in Excel. So I became really good friends with some people in finance, and they were great mentors to me. And I do feel like I'm kind of on par with other analysts at our company, and it's been really amazing to get that experience. And also, especially in the beginning, I never released a dash without getting their opinion. And so even if they don't have time to help, you just want to get their opinion on things. Like how does this compare to dashboards that you do in finance? How does this compare to dashboards you do in sales operations? Things like that.
And some don'ts. Do not waste time on things that don't matter. Scott showed you the stuck puppy. This was a real struggle, right? Because the hiring managers wanted those dashboards. That was really hard for me to say to them, you're not going to get them, and this is why. And so, really, I took time to understand the behind-the-scenes work, what the amount of time was he was spending on that. And I was able to kind of effectively talk to the leaders and say, you're not going to get this, but with his time, we're going to do this. So if you are the analytics person, be your own advocate. If you're not, talk to your manager about being your advocate. Let perfect be the enemy of the good.
My favorite one, for sure, because the data is never, ever going to be 100% accurate. And some people don't always get that, but you always have to look at what the business impact is of the data being 95% correct versus 100% correct. There are some things that just aren't that big of a deal, and you just don't have the time to go through and edit every single entry. And so that's okay, especially when you're strapped for resources. So it's something that I always keep in mind, and we still kind of struggle with this all the time, but it's something that,
Yeah, we just have to pick and choose what matters and what can slide occasionally.
Gracious. Yeah.
Don't get comfortable, continue to iterate, right? So that framework looked a little bit different than what we showed you today, and be okay with it changing, and be upfront with people that you're kind of sharing your ideas with that we don't really know, but we're going to give this a shot, and we're going to continue to iterate. Do not overlook quick wins. You already have data. See what you have, see what you can use, and then leverage it, especially if you're a team of one. And don't get discouraged. Analytics equals what did you say, delayed gratification?
Like a really slow dripping faucet, kind of. So you just don't see that value until later on. And I think this year was our first year where we really saw that value.
Yep.
So it takes some time to build. Deloitte has done some research on this, and they found that it takes about 4 years on average for a team to go from level 1 to level 4. So.
And it does get better. There's a lot of education that has to happen. We as recruiters, I think we really realized this maybe a few months back, because we know our data so closely. We know why it looks a certain way. They just don't get that outside of recruiting. And it takes, 10 conversations sometimes for them to really get it, so don't get discouraged. They will eventually figure it out. And some recommended reading. So Marcella Butler just joined OPower as our new SVP of People, and we're so excited because she's got a really strong background in analytics. She recommended this book, and the three of us are getting through it right now, and so far we're pretty fascinated, so thought we'd pass it along.
So it's all about how to visualize your data with the right graphs. So what graphs are the wrong graphs to use for what situations, which ones are the right ones. And this is really helpful for me. And so her blog is storytellingwithdata.com. We're not paid to endorse her at all. I just think it's been a really great book. So if you're interested in this, then something to check out.
Yep. And then Q&A. So during lunch, we're going to be in this room. Is that right? So that if you'd like to come and ask us questions, because I know we're running, I think, right up on time. But we'll hang around if anybody has questions. Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, so we do have a break until, where am I at? 11:30. And then we're back in this room.